So, where were we? Before I start this video, if there's anyone who doesn't know, this is the second video for this case. So if you haven't watched the first one, go, because otherwise you're going to be lost. Go check that one out and then come back. We'll wait for you. So I was just about to introduce you to Linda and Charlotte Mulhall. Linda Mulhall was born on February 3rd, 1975. In the early 1990s, when she was a teenager, she met Mark Farley, who was 3 years older than her. He was from Drimnagh and he had minor convictions for like public order and road traffic offences. The couple moved in together into 25 Bonley Green, which was also in Tala. They had a baby boy in 1993. They had another boy the following year. In 1995, they had a girl, and then they had a second girl in 1998. So they had 4 children together. Now, most sources will just say Mark Farley and that they had 4 kids. One or two sources, a news source and another, Wikipedia or something, so not like the best source, but one of the news articles does actually say that 2 of them were his children, the older 2 I think. So I don't know, because the majority of sources actually say, like, just say she had 4 kids with him. So that's kind of all that's ever discussed. There's no other fathers ever mentioned. So like that, they had gotten together young, they had had children, and things just weren't great. They were fighting a lot and stuff. So they decided to split in 2000. Linda would go on a couple of years later to meet Wayne Kinsler, who was described as a violent sadist even by members of his own family. He had 25 convictions by the time he met Linda. One of these was for the manslaughter of 86-year-old Thomas Gerard Foreman. The elderly man had been in a graveyard visiting his wife's grave and laying flowers when Wayne came across him. So he used to just mug pensioners and stuff like that. And so he says that he told him, you know, give me your money or whatever, and that whatever happened, he says that he pushed him and that he fell back and his head hit the gravestone. But like sources will say like he was beaten to death. So I think it was more severe than that. Anyway, he only got done for manslaughter, and he was obviously out then by the early 2000s. He had also threatened a woman and her toddler and her kids in general, kind of. So a friend of his sister's was selling her car, and so like he went out with her for like a test drive, and she had her toddler with her, and along the way he like stopped and told her to get out and took the car and basically said, like, if you tell the Gardaí, I'm going to burn your house down with the kids in it. Wayne was a drug pusher and he gave Linda drugs. So a lot of sources say like she was obsessed with him, she was besotted, all this, and she couldn't see any of the bad that he done. But I would also imagine that a lot of that relied on the fact that she was dependent on him for drugs. And like that, she would also not that she didn't see the wrong in it, but he started to hurt her kids and she stayed with him. That's the long story short. So in early 2003, he moved into the house in Bonley. And by the summer, Linda had been pregnant and had miscarried. So kind of in between August and September, he started to hurt the kids. So like that, she had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. And the elder 3 were together like 8, 9, 10. And so he used to hurt them. So if you want to skip past this part, you can. So he would put them all in separate rooms. So firstly, he blamed them. He would say, like, it's your fault Ma lost the baby. He would put the 3 of them in separate rooms. And he used to tell the eldest, so bear in mind the eldest is only 10. And he used to say, when I look at you, I want to hit you. So he would tell them to like strip down to their underwear and lie on the bed or whatever. And then he would like beat them with a belt or like an electrical wire. And it was said like he would do this until they bled. On one of the occasions, the 10-year-old had 20 injuries to his body and was bleeding. On this occasion, he had then gone into the next room to the 9-year-old boy and again was obviously beating him and like hit his face up against a wall. He obviously then went on to hurt the girl as well, the 8-year-old girl. He then went back to the 10-year-old, who by this point is hiding under the bed. And Kinsler like lifts the bed up, reefs the bed up and drags him out and again starts battering him. And it says like that he's out of breath and everything by this point. He doesn't stop till he's out of breath. This, from what I gather, it happens more than once that he hurts them. And again, like that, Linda, she had to have known, like, your children aren't being that like physically abused and hurt, and you don't notice. Like, your children are bleeding. Why don't you notice your children are bleeding? So was she so strung out on drugs that it was kind of just going over her head? She didn't really notice, or like that, because she was dependent on the drugs, was she just not saying anything? So someone tipped them off, tipped the Gardaí off, and so the Gardaí actually arrived, and he told the two boys to hide, like, in a box or a trunk or something, and the Gardaí took the girl into care, and then they returned the following day, and they were able to get the boys. It was also said then that he would, like, in all this time, he would have been beating Linda. So the kids were taken off her in September. I think they also took the other child, the younger one, who wouldn't. I assume maybe she was out with Linda when all this was happening or something, and that's how it wasn't done to her, or maybe because she was slightly younger. I don't know. But the four kids were taken into care. This is September. Linda and Kinsler then moved to Cork. So she's still with him. Her kids have been taken off her because of him, and she's still with him. And I'm going to get to Kathleen and Pharah, but when Kathleen and Pharah are also living in Cork, they did kind of socialise a bit. Linda and Kathleen's relationship is strained. It is said that, like, Linda, like, doted on her mother, like, she was unconditional love, like, and that she just felt like she never actually got that back. So by the end of 2003, the couple actually moved to Manchester. Now, the plan, I think, had been to actually move here, like, and live there, but after a couple of weeks, they came back. The couple at this point are, like, fighting loads. The relationship is very tense. And so this, and also there is pressure from the Gardaí and, like, social workers and stuff to help to press charges against Wayne Kinsler. And so she agrees to cooperate with them. So after all this, the kids are then, put back into her care. By February 10th, 2004, Linda is not coping well, and so she voluntarily puts the kids back into care. She is drinking a lot. She starts taking heroin. She is said to have several suicide attempts and self-harming. She is evicted from Bonley. It's a council house, so she's evicted from there, and she is homeless. So she's essentially kind of going through hostels. I think she's staying a bit in the family home in Jobstown. And then in May, she actually gets the kids back into her care, and they are put into, like, a homeless unit in the Coombe area, so in Dublin 8. But they are actually evicted from here because of antisocial behaviour. So she rings her dad and begs him to let her and the kids come and stay with him. And because he doesn't want the kids to be taken off her again, he agrees. But obviously part of this is that she needs to clean up. Like, she has to, start looking after herself, looking after the kids, stop drinking, stop drugs. In July 2004, Wayne Kinsler pled guilty to 3 counts of child abuse. He was sentenced to 4 years for the eldest boy and 3 years for each of the other 2 children, but these would run concurrently, so his sentence was essentially 7 years. That's not even 2.5 years per child. For the other case where he had robbed the car and threatened the mother, he received a 4-year sentence for this, but the judge suspended it on condition that Kinsler then took, like, anger management and stuff like this, and that he had to then keep the peace for 4 years after he was released from the 7-year sentence. And that is Linda for now. So while we're leaving Linda, she is now back in the family home with her children. So at this point, her dad, her brother Andrew, sister Marie, Linda, and her 4 kids are all living in this 3-bed house in Tallaght. Charlotte Mulhall was born on the 21st of March 1983. And by the time our story takes place in 2005, she has been arrested 11 times. The first time she was arrested was in July 2000, so she was like 17 at this stage. And she steals money from Bewley's Cafe in the Square in Tallaght. So the Square will be mentioned again. It's a shopping centre in Tallaght. She wasn't charged for this. I'm going to guess maybe it was because of her age and stuff at the time. She would also go then on to have, like, loads of public order offences, like arrests. A lot of the time it was arrests and then she wasn't charged. In June 2003, she was arrested for an assault on Grafton Street. Again, she served no jail time for this. So Linda and Charlotte, and I'm kind of guessing some of the other kids, they left school early. Again, this was kind of just the type of family that it wasn't important. There's actually a source from like a quote from a criminal law barrister who wasn't part of this case but was looking at it, and basically said, like, like there would be types of families like this where crime is genetic, like it's learned behavior, and it's just what they do. And it's nearly like the parents are so used to dealing with like the guardian stuff, what's a truant officer to them. And yeah, I kind of assume maybe some of the other kids might have been like that as well. But Linda and Charlotte left school early. They never like had a traditional job since they left. So speaking of which, Charlotte would go on to become a prostitute in her teens. She worked in the Baggot Street area, so she was actually well known to Gaddy in Tala and in Baggot Street. She was a well known prostitute, and apparently she was very popular. Charlotte was quite like big, I mean, some sources will just go straight away and be like, oh, she was fat or she was big or whatever, but she was quite big, even like built strong. So the other prostitutes and stuff were afraid of her, so no one would ever dare try to take like her patch. It is also said that she went through boyfriends. Now, some sources say that she then got her mother into this, and then another source that I came across had said that her mother got her into it. So I'm not really sure, but I think it's essentially that Charlotte had become the prostitute, and then kind of gets her mother to kind of entices her mother into it. But we will come to that. In late 2004, Charlotte actually received €42,000 in compensation for like a road accident. Obviously, this is a lot of money. If you handed me 42K right now, I'd be like, yes, deposit, boom. But Charlotte squandered it. So she did help her family out. She bought her dad a motorbike. She gave her mom a few grand. She would give Pharah €1,500. She'd buy him a mobile. She looked after the rest of the family as well. I would say she gave Linda a lot. Linda and Charlotte are quite close, and it is described that Charlotte was actually like the big sister, even though there was like 9 years between them. And then it is essentially said that she squandered the rest. She just used it on drinking drugs. So again, it's kind of like, and I'm not trying to be all like, oh, like, oh, these families, and like, but it is a thing, like, that would never be like it's never. What am I trying to say? That money, it was never kind of like, how can this help me, how can this better me or whatever. It was just kind of like, oh yes, I've got loads of money, so it just means extra drink, it means extra this, extra that. So now we come to Kathleen and Pharah, and I wanted to tell you the others first, just so you kind of had the family tree in your head, because in the summer of 2001, Kathleen is with her, now it says Kathleen is with her daughters, so I'm not sure exactly which ones, but she is in Coco's nightclub in Tala. It's actually gone by now. So Marie, her daughter, was going out with a man called Robert Stewart, and his brother's name was Trevor Stewart, and Farah was friends with him. And this is how they were all in the nightclub. Linda was also actually seeing your man Trevor at this time, so it could have been Linda she was with, it could have been Marie she was with, and this is how obviously they got talking, whatever. So Farah and Kathleen hit it off, and they began an affair, because obviously Kathleen is still married to John at this stage. And so the affair starts, and then again, I don't know if that's when the allegation of abuse starts or if she had actually, said it beforehand. I can't find definitive sources on that. Kathleen is 49 and Farah is 38. So instead of like leaving the family home and running off with her toy boy, Kathleen moves Farah into the home and forces John out. Kathleen actually went as far as getting a barring order on John, so he had to leave the house. And so obviously this kind of splits the family. Marie and Andrew leave with John, the dad, and they actually go to stay with Linda at a while. So at this point, she's still living in Bonley. So they go to stay with her for a while. And then John actually comes into some money, so he's able to then rent his own place. And again, Andrew and Marie stay with him. John and James at this point are there, but they kind of side with the dad more. And Linda is also siding with the dad because obviously her and the mom have tension anyway. But Charlotte remains loyal to her mom. And so because Charlotte remains loyal to her mom and wants to hang around with her and wants, Linda will. Because Linda wants to, Linda cares for Charlotte and wants to be with her and wants to, look after her and stuff like that. So there was obviously tension in the house. It's actually said that there's like tension in the neighborhood and stuff because they can't believe that she has done this. John and James don't get on with Pharah, and it's actually said that they argue over drugs. Friends of Pharah and people that he works with and stuff like that would say that he referred to Kathleen in their relationship as the boss. But by September 2002, the couple they leave the house and they move to Cork. And so John is able to then move back into the home, and so Marie and Andrew also go. And so obviously that's why then when Linda later on needs to move into the house, it's her dad that she asks and she goes and moves in. So in Cork, Kathleen and Pharah move around a lot. They kind of live in a good few places. The relationship is bizarre, to put it nicely, and then obviously just horrible and toxic, to be honest. Like in previous relationships, Pharah was abusive to Kathleen, especially when he drank. So people would say that they'd see her with black eyes. She was actually in the hospital a good few times. She had like broken ribs and stuff like that, and she would always say that she had been mugged. Now, some of Farah's friends also say that they would see him with like, a black eye or scratches on his face and stuff like this. So they're kind of saying that it was a bit of both, not condoning it in any way, but that Kathleen was also like in it and an instigator and stuff like that. I'm just going to read from one of the books. She would later on tell the Gardaí, "I had two very different relationships with Pharah. When he was sober, he was a beautiful person, a beautiful man, but when he was using both drink and drugs, he was like the devil. He attacked me nearly every day. He was totally crazy when he was drinking. He'd beat me with his hands, his fist, or with a belt. He'd mostly use a belt. He'd say, 'I wouldn't beat you if I didn't love you.' I believed him. He told me on a number of occasions that if I told anyone about the attacks, he would kill me. I believed him when he said this." Regarding the cigarettes that I would have spoke about earlier, the cigarette burning, he'd light a cigarette and then put the cigarette up against his skin and let it burn his skin. It would come up in a blister. He'd burst the blister and either suck or eat the skin. The pain wouldn't bother him. He'd only burn himself with cigarettes when he was drinking. The worst was when we lived in Cork. He put the cigarette up to his forehead and just let it burn. I slapped away his hand because you could smell the skin burning. Only when he'd drink, he'd burn himself. On about 5 or 6 times, I woke up with cigarette burns. I'd have been drinking and in a deep sleep, and the following morning I'd see the burn marks. Farah said that I fell asleep with the cigarette, but I know I didn't. After one of the beatings in Cork, he left me in the house for a week. He kept the key to the front door, and there were bars on the window so I couldn't get out. I had a horrible relationship with Farah. The relationship we had was strange in that if I wanted a cuddle or a hug off him, he wouldn't let me near him. But if it was the other way around, if he wanted to touch me or have sex with me, he could. Another bizarre aspect of the relationship was Kathleen would say that Farah would tell her like to pretend to be pregnant to make other girls jealous and other guys jealous and stuff because his girl was pregnant. I don't know, but obviously he thought that other girls would be like, Kathleen is 49, and I'm not saying obviously you can't get pregnant at that time, but Kathleen had her tubes tied like over 10 years before this all happened, and so like obviously she wasn't pregnant, but she would tell people. So, and it's not just her saying that this happened. Landlords down in Cork and stuff would say that when they'd call to get the rent or whatever, that like Kathleen would say like, oh, that she was pregnant, and someone said even she'd wear like loose flowy dresses and stuff like this. Then another time like she would say that she had miscarried. I think she even then told someone else like that Farah had beat her and she lost the baby and stuff like this. So the whole thing was just entirely bizarre. Farah would do courses, so he'd do like a FOSS course, so he was obviously working like temp and stuff like that. And Kathleen didn't. So like when they were in Cork, just Kathleen would get up and drink. And again, I'm going back to that whole thing, like that's what they'd done. That was their life, their culture and stuff, that they'd just get up and it's like, what do we do? Oh, let's have a drink. And that will actually lead us to March 2005. So in September 2004, the couple actually moved back to Dublin. And so obviously they had nowhere to stay. So they went to like the asylum seekers office or something and asked for help. So they were placed in Mountain View B&B in Fairhouse, which is near Tala. So at this stage, when Farah was doing the false causes and stuff, he got extra like money. You'd get extra money. You might get like €40 or whatever extra kind of on top of your normal dole. And so when they left for Dublin, he voluntarily left the FOSS course. And so when he went to the social welfare, they were basically like, no, you voluntarily left the course. You're not getting it or whatever. So he had to actually become like Kathleen's dependent. So, I mean, I'm sure it's the same in everywhere, but obviously if social welfare, if you're on your own, you get X amount. And obviously if you're like, the idea is if you like, you get X, and I think like if you don't live together, he gets Y. But if you live together, it's combined, but it's less, and it's Z obviously, but it's less. So they would be down kind of like, again, like that, it was 40 something euro. Farah didn't like this. He didn't like that he was dependent on Kathleen then, because Kathleen would get the money. And so on the 10th of October, Kathleen actually went to the manager of the B&B and told them that she was afraid of Farah and that she needed to leave. She wanted to go. And so they actually found her a different B&B on the north side. And so when this happened, then their social welfare was split. So then they got like 138.80 or something each. So they were now up. It was like €43. So they were now up €43. So she had been told like that she was put in the other B&B, and it was kind of on condition that she wasn't to see Farah and he wasn't to be there and stuff. But she was still with Farah. She was, still seeing him and stuff. And yeah, so essentially they done that just to get the extra bit of money. Eventually, the couple would find accommodation then, and so they moved into flat 1, 17 Richmond Cottages, which was on the north side. So it was Drumcondra, like Ballybock area. So I mentioned before that Charlotte was a prostitute, and that there's the sources that she then got her mother into it. So Kathleen would say that she wasn't aware that Farah had like a wife and kids, because she's, and she's saying like she would never have been with him, this and that and stuff. But she would also, so that was in like an interview, but to the Gardaí, she tells them that she would like that sell herself to get money up for him to send back to Kenya. So she obviously then had to know. And it was important to Farah, even though he had no plans to go back and he had no plans to bring them over, it was still important for him to provide for his family, because essentially if he didn't, they wouldn't survive. Like, so the money that he sent to his wife and to his mother was important. And so Kathleen said like that she would have been a prostitute, and that she would have given some of her social welfare money to him for him to transfer over. She actually says that she would have done transfers over to them. And so essentially this is why she, is, I think Charlotte is kind of saying to her how much she could make and this and thing, like, and it's like, I think it says like one of the books says like 50 or 60 euro a go. Obviously the bad toxic abusive relationship continued in Dublin. And so we're kind of at March now. We're in March 2005. So just to recap, John and James, the sons, are in Wheatfield prison. Andrew and Marie live at home. Andrew is 16. I don't know if he's still in school or whatever he's doing. And Marie is the apprentice mechanic. They are living in Jobestown, Kilclare, with the dad, Linda, and her 4 kids. Charlotte is described as a bit of a nomad, I suppose. She will go to that house. She actually stays a lot of the time with Kathleen and Farah in theirs. And then I don't know where else she does be with guys and stuff, obviously. So Kathleen and Farah's flat, there is like the sitting room and then kind of like a little kitchen area. And then there's a bedroom and like an ensuite in there. And so there's the toilet, the sink, and the shower. And that's the flat. So the bedroom actually has a double bed and then bunk beds. So like that, Charlotte would stay over. Charlotte would have like clothes and everything here. And so she'd sleep in the bunk bed and they'd be in the double bed. So I don't know, I feel like the whole dynamic is just so weird, and I nearly feel like, and again, I'm not trying to judge, but I feel like they're just so off their heads and stuff that it just doesn't work, because I just feel like that dynamic of staying in the home of your mom and her partner who beats her or whatever he's doing, and you're there. I don't know. Anyway, so we are now at the 20th of March 2005. And everything I say now going forward, we know of because of what Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte will eventually tell Gardaí. So, what we know, what we don't know, what they did, what they didn't do, everything is essentially what they tell us. So, on Monday, the 20th, Charlotte is in Kilclare Gardens. And so she wakes up, Linda wakes up. Linda has her own actual room kind of out the back, like I think it's like a converted shed type thing. And so they wake up and they're kind of like, what are we doing? You know, all this. And so they start drinking. Charlotte pours them a bottle of vodka or whatever. Vodka seems to be the preferred drink of the Mulhalls. And the next day will be Charlotte's 22nd birthday. And like one of the books will say like, oh, that her 21st was so bad and this and that. So she was like determined to make sure that this birthday was great. So Linda has the kids back. And so Linda's plans are supposed to be to spend the day with her son, who is now 11. And so after about 2 vodkas, Charlotte gets a call from Kathleen, who says that her and Pharah are going drinking in the city centre. Do they want to come? So Charlotte is all excited and says to Linda, like, you know, Ma and Pharah are going drinking. Do you want to go? And Linda's like, no, I have the kid, like. And so Charlotte's like, oh, come on, and is real, like, you know, trying to egg her on to go. And like that, Linda usually will cave. And so Linda kind of caves and then says about bringing her son with them. And Charlotte goes ballistic. And essentially, like, she says, like, how are we supposed to get drinking done with him, you know, following us around? And so again, Linda caves and gets Andrew to look after him. And so basically says like, oh, you know, Uncle Andy or whatever is here if you need anything. And so even though she was supposed to spend the day with her son, she goes off. So the two of them get ready. I think they might have even had a bit more drink while they got done up. And then they got the 77 into town. And around this time, it's just after 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And they meet Kathleen and Pharah at McDonald's on O'Connell Street. All 4 of them are drunk at this stage. So they're talking or whatever. And Linda had gotten like her lip pierced. And so she was saying how it was sore and stuff. And so Kathleen was looking at it, and then even Pharah was looking at it. And I don't know why, but basically I think it was like a bar in it. And they were kind of saying like, oh, if we go up to here, you can get a ring for it or something. I don't know why they thought that might help, maybe the size of it or something. But anyway, so Farah's like, oh, I know this place. And so they go up to Henry Street, and then he can't remember where it is. And so then they decide to go have a few drinks. But all 4 of them are on social welfare. So as I said, the social welfare is like 138 a week. And in town, pints are probably on average, even for your cheapest ones, €4 or €5. And so what they do is they go up to the Dunn Stores off license on North Earl Street. And they go in and they buy a litre bottle of vodka. Then they go into Dunn's. It's so weird, right? I actually used to, for a job, I used to have to go in there. The newsagents and the groceries and all is here. And then the off license is here. And I actually think it's because of the area it's in. By having it on its own, they can keep an eye on it and make sure people aren't robbing and stuff. So anyway, they go into the grocery section next, and they get 4 bottles of Coke. So the 4 of them pour out half of the Coke and then pour in vodka. So they all basically get like 250 mils. That's the bottle gone. That's my maths if you needed to know, just like me. So like this just even shows you, I think, how hardcore they are, or maybe just how bad I am. But when I read that and it was like half the bottle was vodka, I was like, oh my god, the taste, this, like my stomach. So maybe I'm just really bad at being able to drink spirits. I can't honestly, I have to be able to have so much Coke or whatever it is that I can't taste the vodka or whatever drink I'm having, whatever spirit. Or I have to have, like, my go-to used to be, not that you asked, my go-to drink used to be vodka and lime cordial. because it's a tangy drink, you couldn't taste the vodka or whatever else you're having in it. So I just feel like that shows as well kind of how hardcore they are. As I said, Pharah used to apparently drink a couple of vodka bottles a day. It is said that in Jobstown there was always alcohol there, like it would always be like just a bottle of vodka in the press. And so obviously they start drinking. Farah then remembers where the jewellery store place is, so they go back up to Henry Street, and Linda gets like I think she gets the ring instead of a stud or whatever, instead of a bar. And so she puts this in, apparently that's a bit better. And then it's kind of like, what do we do? Where do we go? Because they're just wandering around drinking. And I know a lot of people do the books, and there's a documentary by TV3 and stuff, and they're like, so the four of them, like the adults, were out drinking on the street. You know, all this whole thing. And so they are. And it's a bank holiday Monday, I think, because the Paddy's Day. No, I'm telling a lie. Friday was the Paddy's Day, so that would have been the bank holiday. So people are obviously at work and stuff like that. But I'd say it's busy, and because of it was just after Paddy's Day, I'd say there was a lot of tourists and stuff around. So anyway, I think Charlotte suggests like, oh, why don't we go up to the Boardwalk? Now, if you are thinking, oh, the Boardwalk, very nice, I'm going to go there next time I'm in Dublin. Don't. No. The Boardwalk was supposed to be like this kind of lovely place to go and like look at with the Liffey and all this. It's not. It's essentially where like that dealers go, and you know, or you go to buy your drugs or whatever, and like that you'd have people then just kind of drinking and stuff. I think there can be a lot of trouble and stuff like this. I would just avoid it. You should just avoid it. So they're here, they're drinking. And then Linda, who was supposed to be off drink, remember, she wasn't supposed to be drinking, takes out a little baggie with 10 E's. So bear in mind, it's probably, would it be even 3 o'clock at this stage? And she takes an E. Charlotte takes an E. Kathleen is like, what are you doing? What are you doing over there? Sees them and it's like, I want one. I want to be part of the cool gang. And so she takes one as well. And then they kind of say, do you want to give Pharah one? Now, I don't know how drunk everybody is for him not to know that this is going on beside him. But they're like, do you want to give one to Pharah? Or he's right there, like, do you know what I mean? And then she's like, no, like he's already so drunk. And he has been drinking essentially since Paddy's Day. So Paddy's Day is a Friday, he's drinking the Saturday, he's drinking the Sunday, and then he's now drinking on the Monday. So essentially, even it said, like, Kathleen says that when they got like up on that day, he literally just got up and started drinking a can of beer. And so she's kind of like, no, because he's already so messy and starting to get into the bad side. So they're sitting around drinking. I don't even know, like, I think Linda is playing music from her phone. And at this point, like, Kathleen and Pharah start arguing with each other and all this, but I don't even know what type of conversation you'd be like, even before the fighting started. What type of conversation are you having while you're drinking and taking E's in the middle of Dublin city centre? So, like that, Pharah starts getting belligerent and, argumentative and stuff, and starts kind of yelling at Kathleen and stuff. And then basically Linda and like Charlotte are like, especially Linda, because remember, Linda doesn't have a lot of patience for her mom, and she does not like Pharah. She kind of thinks Pharah like gives her the creeps. She just say like, I can't understand a word he says. They get fed up then, and they're like, no, I'm going. And so they all start walking back up O'Connell Street to head. I think the girls at first, I think it is kind of like what they're going, like Linda's like, I'm going home, because obviously she's like, no, I'm going home to my son. But as they're walking then, it's kind of asked and agreed that they're going to go back to Richmond Cottages. Now, Pharah is very drunk. Him and Kathleen are like shouting at each other, walking up O'Connell Street. People are like staring at them. And he sees this little boy. They say about 5, right? Out playing with his friends. Now, again, just so many questions there. Why is there a 5-year-old out playing with friends on O'Connell Street on their own? I don't care if you live in town. Bring them to a playground or something. So he sees this little boy, and this little boy is Chinese. And he starts saying, Kathleen, like, that's my son. Look, it's my son. He goes over to the child. I think he starts like actually like pulling, at the child and stuff, like, oh, like, it's my son, all this. And Kathleen is like, are you mad? Like, no, it's not your son. It's not your fucking son. Like, blah, 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 all this, right? And so Linda and Charlotte have like stormed ahead at this stage, right? This is all going on. Eventually gets him away from him. And then this is when Muhammad Ali Abu Bakr says that he saw him. So again, he says even as soon as he saw the white football jersey, he knew, like, he was like, oh, there's Pharah. And so him and his girlfriend stop to say hello and stuff. And he says Pharah is very messy, like that. He says, and he knows how he can be. So he's kind of being like, are you okay, man? Like, take it easy, all this. He sees Kathleen, obviously, who he knows, and he sees the other two girls who he puts down to being Kathleen's daughters. In fairness, they look alike, especially Linda and Kathleen, they do. So it would be probably a good assumption to say, like, oh, that's her daughters. And when he's asking, like, Pharah, you're alright, all this, Kathleen's like pulling him, and it's like, yeah, he's fine, like, I'm pulling him. So they eventually get back to the flat. And so this is where the different sources will kind of say different versions of events. For the most part, it's all the same. And if you know the case, you already know what happens. But there are slight differences. So they get back and they continue drinking. Obviously, Kathleen also has a supply of vodka in the flat. So again, they start drinking it with Coke or whatever, right? And at this point, Linda, Charlotte, and Kathleen have also taken another 2 ecstasy tablets each. And so that's 9 of the 10 gone. Kathleen decides to take the final E, the last one, and crush it up and put it into Farah's vodka because she thinks it might like mellow him out. I would think that if you already have like a violent or aggressive, abusive alcoholic who can be a bit unpredictable, I think the last thing you should be doing is spiking his alcohol. So they do this. Now, again, this is kind of where the whole thing gets a bit, because it is said it's while they're in doing the drinks, but then that would mean Pharah hadn't gotten the drink yet with the alcohol, with the drug. Then it's said that they were in the room, and then one of the sources even make it seem like they left. They actually went to the chipper and all this. So where Kathleen and Charlotte are at this point, I'm not sure, because even in one of them, it says that Linda is sitting on Charlotte's lap when it happens, right? But anyway, they came in and they put like a Sean Paul CD on. Remember Sean Paul? And so they're, dancing or moving or whatever they do. And so Linda is either sitting on Charlotte's lap or just sitting on the couch. And Pharah sits beside her. And Pharah starts mooching up to her. And then starts like whispering to her and like leaning in and putting his arm around her, all this. And then says a few things. So he says, you're so like your mommy. He also then says, we're 2 creatures of the night. I don't really know what he meant by that. And obviously they didn't really get it and it kind of freaked them out. But if I was to think of anything from that, I'd nearly think like it's implying about the whole prostitution thing. But that's Charlotte. I don't really know what creature of the night would mean to Linda. But anyway, he says that. That freaks her out. So she's like, what the fuck you on about? Like, and so then like at this stage, one of the sources is saying that she's kind of like, where is Kathleen and Linda gone? And then obviously another one is that they're in the room, and so she's kind of saying like, she's giving out to Kathleen, kind of saying like he'd just as much sleep with me as he would with you, kind of thing. And whatever happens anyway, they're up. They're now standing up, and he has his hands on Linda. He won't let go. Like at this point, I think Kathleen and Charlotte know what Pharah is like. So at first they're kind of just ignoring him because they're kind of like, he'll just stop. It's more if we kind of antagonize him or whatever. So they think he'll stop. But then when they're up and he has his hands on Linda's waist and he's not letting go and she's trying to pull him off and he won't, that they're obviously like, what are you doing? And like Charlotte's like, Pharah, get your hands off Linda. And then that even Kathleen is like, Pharah, what are you doing? Get your hands off her. Like, and like Linda is starting to cry and everything and trying to get his hands off and he won't. And it's said that he's just like in a day, like he's just focused on Linda. He's not even, it's like he can't even hear what they're saying, right? And then so the next part I'm going to tell you, again, the sources say, and I think it's important to say this. I could have just picked the most common one and just said them and told you the story. But I think it's important to note that they have said different kind of bits because I think it's important later. So for what happens next, One of them, one source will say that he was still holding Linda when this thing happened. Others would say that all of a sudden he just stopped, he let go of her. And in that moment, just for that like brief second, Kathleen was caught off guard, and that he grabbed her and started like pulling her to the bedroom and was going like this to the girls and stuff. And that Kathleen then says, kill him for me. He's going to kill me, blah, 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 all this. And starts shouting at them, kill me, kill him, kill him, kill him, and all this. Like, kill him for me, kill him for me. So either he's holding Linda still, or he's now holding Kathleen. Charlotte then goes and gets a Stanley knife from like the kitchen counter or something that's just out, and goes up behind Pharah, grabs his head and slits his throat. Pharah then obviously lets go of Linda or Kathleen. It obviously is in shock, is like, and starts like grabbing his neck. All this is blood spurting everywhere. His main theory then is that he's holding Kathleen, so Kathleen starts shouting like, get him off me, get him away from me, get him away from me. Charlotte says that she slits him again, and then he starts going into the bedroom. He then like stumbles and smacks his head off the bunk bed and then falls onto the ground. And at this point, Linda grabs a hammer, and Charlotte and Linda go into the bedroom after him and start stabbing and pounding at his head with the hammer. And again, obviously, I don't know how long this took, but going crazy. Bear in mind, they've had the ecstasy, they've had the alcohol, and then they have the adrenaline of what's just happened. So they're going 90. And it is said that his last words, as he's gasping and gurgling and all this, he just keeps saying like, Kathy, Kathy. And then like that, he's gone. He dies. And the two of them are looking at him for what seems a couple of minutes. And then Charlotte says, he's dead. He's dead. And the two of them just start crying and hugging each other. At this point, Kathleen, I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it's just so bizarre. At this point, Kathleen is sitting down with her glass of vodka, watching the telly. The two girls come out, obviously covered in blood or whatever. She looks at them and they're it's like it just sinks in then. And so then apparently she starts shouting like, get rid of him, get rid of him.